Hey, this is Professor Homa. I'm going to review installing MAMP, and I'm going to do it first on the Mac version, and then I'll do it on the Windows version. There's both a Mac and a Windows version, and the MAMP software is free. It comes with MAMP Pro, but you don't have to use MAMP Pro, but it does install together. And I just want to point something out. I already have it installed, but I'm going to delete this. But you can see that it'll create a folder in your applications called MAMP and MAMP Pro, and we won't use MAMP Pro, we'll just use MAMP. And here's the MAMP folder, and keep in mind it does keep a folder called htdocs, where initially it'll recommend that you install your sites in there. If you make any websites, you can store them in there. Basically what MAMP is going to do, it's going to act as kind of a web server, and it's going to be able to interpret PHP code, which means it can interpret databases, MySQL databases, which we're going to be working with. So anyway, that's what it stands for, My Apache, MySQL, PHP. We'll talk about all that, but My Apache is web software, MySQL is the database system that we'll be using, and PHP is the programming language that can interpret SQL and basically serve it up or display it on a web page. So we're going to be using MAMP as kind of a virtual server, so we don't have to upload things to a server. You can do it locally on your computer, and you can back things up and you can save them and upload them and send them to me if you need to. But initially we're going to have to install it. So I'm going to go over the Mac install, and then I'm going to go over the Windows install, and it should be very similar. I have both versions on kind of a partition, a Windows partition. One thing to keep in mind, I'll go to downloads first, and you'll see there's Mac OS X and Windows. Keep in mind too that it's called MAMP for Windows. There is software called XAMPP with XXAMP, and there's also software called WAMP, which is a Windows version, but they're made by different companies, so we're going to be using the MAMP one. That's the one we've been using, and is very popular. So and also when you're working with Mac, that there's a newer version on Mac than there is on Windows. They'll both do the same thing, but you'll see a higher version for the Mac version. That's what I'm going to use right now. And what I'm even going to do is I'm just going to delete this stuff. Now I did back up this htdocs, so I'm just going to wipe this out so I have kind of a fresh install. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to uninstall it. I'll just delete it altogether. And you can back up files if you already have it installed or you're using it for WordPress or anything. But I'm just going to wipe it out right now and do a fresh install. And I'm going to go back and I'm just going to do a download. Now it is a big download right now, so I'll pause when it's downloading, and then I'll go back and do the install. But I'm going to download the Mac version, so I'll download it right now, and it's in a package format, and it's doing MAMP and MAMP Pro, and it's 331 megabytes, so it's a fairly big file. I don't need this, so I'm going to let it download, and I'm going to pause here, and then I'm going to go through the install on a Mac. Okay, I just completed my download. I didn't install it yet, and one thing just to point out that this version is very new. They had one in, I think, November or December, but this is a version that just came out in the beginning of January, so it's brand new, the 4.1. So we'll try that out, and here's my download down here. Also, I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, but we went to www.mamp.info. That's where we went initially. It's not mamp.com. You might see something else pop up when you go to mamp.com, but it's mamp.info. And here's my download, my package. And again, we're on a Mac, so I'm just going to click on that and go through the installer. I'll just hit continue, continue. There's not a lot to do. I'll agree with everything, and it's just going to put it on my hard drive. I'll hit continue, and I'm not going to change my install location, and I'll hit install. Okay, now it has installed, and I'm going to close this. And what I'll do first, I'm going to get rid of my icon here. This is my icon on my dock. I'm going to get rid of it because that's pointing to the old one, which I just threw in the trash. So I'll get rid of that, and I'll just remove that. And then I'll go to my applications, and I'll see that I have MAMP just installed. And if I see the MAMP application there, I'll see that it's 4.1. And so I know that's my newest version. And if I go to htdocs, I'll see that it's empty. It didn't pull anything in, so I did back up my other ones. And there's MAMP Pro. We're not going to use MAMP Pro. You can delete MAMP Pro, or you could just leave it there. But we're going to use MAMP. And I'll just take this icon, and I'll drag it, and I'll put it on my dock so I could use MAMP. So that's the icon for that. And I'll launch it. Now when you launch MAMP, you'll see this little window come up with the elephant, and it'll say start servers. It'll have preferences. Now before you do anything, before you start servers, I just want to point out one thing on a Mac. I'm going to go to my system preferences only because I had a problem with this, and I just want to point it out that at one point I had installed MySQL. Now if you never installed MySQL, you don't have to worry about it, but I had installed MySQL from the phpmyadmin website, And what happened is there was actually a MySQL running in addition to the one I was running on MAMP. So if you ever see an icon down there for MySQL, just make sure that it's stopped and you don't have it to automatically start, because I had a problem where there was a conflict. So I just want to make sure this is off. This is not the one we're doing for MAMP. It's in a different place, but I had two running at the same time and I had a conflict. So anyway, this is the kind of the main window that you're going to see when you do this. You don't have to worry about MAMP Pro down here. And a couple things I'll just point out in preferences, and these will be very similar on Windows too, so this won't be any different. But what I like to do is I don't start servers when I start MAMP. I like to just, it will open a web page, but I like to start the servers automatically. I like to kind of do that myself, so I can click the button and make sure they're both starting. And when you quit, you can check stop servers. So this may not be this way by default, but I don't want them starting when I first launch MAMP. I just want to start them myself. And but I do want to stop them when I quit. So when I quit, I want the servers stopping. I don't want them to continue to run. So that's all I'd have to do under start stop. Ports, by default on a Mac, it's going to have 8888 for the Apache port. That's the web server port. We're not going to use this Nginx. We're not going to use that. This is the MySQL port. That's the database server. And by default on a Mac, it'll be 8889. And it also says you could set this to 80 and 3306. This is the numbers that it uses when it's on Windows. And I'm actually going to switch this. And if you have any problems, you could switch it back. But I'm going to use this right now only because if you use these versions, then it'll just, the URL in the window in our address bar will just say localhost. You won't have to see the number in there. So I'm going to use kind of the Windows version of the port and just use that for now. So I'm going to change that. So if you're on a Mac, you could do that. And I'll hit OK. Well, actually, I'll check these. You shouldn't have to do anything for PHP. It is showing a new version of PHP, but you shouldn't have to mess with that at all. As far as web server, by default, it's going to use htdocs. There's a folder inside MAMP that it's going to use to host your files. Now, we can change that, and I'll mention later on about changing that, but you could leave it by default for now. But some people don't like having their files stored somewhere in their application, so we can change that, but for now, just be aware that it's in Applications, MAMP, htdocs. That's where we're going to put our web pages that connect to our database, when we do that. But we're not going to do that right away. MySQL, we shouldn't have to do anything here. So I'm just going to hit OK. So again, under Preferences, the only thing that I changed when I went in here is under Start Stop. I just didn't want Start Servers automatically, and I left it on Stop Servers when you quit. And on ports, I switched it around so it's using 80 and 3306 for the Apache and the MySQL. That's all I changed in there, so I could hit OK again. Now I'm going to hit Start Servers. And I just want to make sure that these little things kind of check so they're on. Now, here's the weird thing with Mac. When I do use those ports, it asks me to verify. If I left it at the other one, it wouldn't do this, but it asks me to verify with my password. So it might become so annoying that I might want to change it. But just for now, I'm gonna put it there, and then it jumps to this home page. And this home page will basically have some things like my website, which you'll go to, and that's where we'll have some websites stored, so that we can actually have PHP that actually displays things from a database. And it also has a link here that we could click on phpmyadmin. This is the software that gets installed with MAMP that we're going to use to make our database. So if I click on that, it'll open up something called phpmyadmin. And it may look like this. It might look like the old version, or it may look like this PMA-HOM. It may look like that. And we'll try to use this version because it looks a little more modern looking. But this is the software, this phpmyadmin, that we're going to use to work with databases. And it actually gets installed with MAMP so that it can actually act like it's on a server. So MAMP acts like your virtual server so that you can actually work with a database. So it's kind of pretend we're hosting it on a server, everything complete with passwords. Now, if you have other databases, you're going to see more things listed over here, but by default, you'll see these three things: information schema, MySQL, and performance schema by default. That's if you just installed it for the first time. You may have another database called phpmyadmin, which we could also put in there, which we don't have to worry about right now, but this is the software that we'll be using quite a bit to be working with our databases. Now when I quit it, I'll just go to MAMP, quit MAMP, and it will stop my server. So I don't have to stop the servers before doing that. So I'll just stop my servers, and I'll quit at the same time, and I'll go out of MAMP. So I'll still have this phpmyadmin running. You could just close this up in the window. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the Windows version, but I'm going to go over in Windows and do that because I'm on my Mac side right now.